Hi class, welcome to Justice 105, Introduction to Justice Studies. I'm your professor, Karen Nielsen, and before I get started with talking to you about the class and what you're going to be doing this semester and what Justice Studies is all about, I just want to give you a brief introduction to who I am and why I designed the course the way that I did. So I'm in my fourth year of my PhD and JD program. That means that I'm getting my doctorate degree in justice studies, and I'm also getting my law degree from the law school at ASU, so I'm doing both degrees at once. My focus in both is on Indian law, specifically on racism within water law in the Southwest. So if you're interested in that, let me know. We're going to get there in week 5 of the course of environmental justice as well. On a more personal note, I've lived in Phoenix for 5 years. I got my master's at ASU and then continued here for my doctoral degree. I live here with my partner, Roy, my dog, June, who's on my couch right over there sleeping. We just went on a 2.5-mile walk this morning. And I like hiking and camping and cooking. I cook a lot in my spare time, and I was almost on MasterChef. So that's a little bit about me. You're going to be putting a little bit about you in your introductions this week for our discussion boards. And just a brief introduction to the class. I know you're going to be reading the syllabus and the course schedule, so you'll get a good overview of what's going on there. But I just want to kind of provide a glance over what the syllabus says since it is a little bit long. So what is justice studies? It's an interdisciplinary field focusing on the intersections of what justice is and how society, in this case we're going to be studying the United States, constructs injustice and justice. And so in our class, since this is designed to be an introduction class, you can think of it sort of like an intro to bio class, where I know that a lot of you will be coming in here with ideas of what racism or sexism or the criminal justice system looks like, but I'm going to also provide an overview for people who might not have those experiences or have had that learning in the past. So we're first going to start out with how to read and write critically, which if you're continuing in this program is really important. You need to be able to look at materials, both academic and things that you would read every day, and be able to draw out the important meanings behind them and critique them and write about it in an academic way. So we're doing the whole first week on that, using a creative piece as well as some infographics and another sort of guideline on how to read critically that I got from Harvard University. We're then going to do a really broad overview of different areas of justice so that you can kind of get a feel for how broad our school is and the different things that all the professors work in if you continue taking classes in this department. So we're going to look at economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, and environmental justice, finishing off the semester with a paper that you're going to be writing. You have a whole week to write it, since we have no coursework that week, on your perspectives on access to justice and what justice in your mind looks like. So we're going to, again, be doing a broad overview using specific examples. So for example, next week with economic justice, you're going to be looking at the minimum wage as well as critiques of capitalism. So I take little pieces of these giant justice concepts so that it's something that's relatable, that's going on in the world right now. So the minimum wage is something that's in the presidential election, and I want you to think about it. And use those specific examples to understand all the different areas of justice that there are. This isn't even all of them, but this is a good overview of what our school does. And then I want you to use these specific areas of justice to think about your own positionality, which basically means your own situation or perspective that you have on the world. And I'll talk a little bit about my positionality at the end of this video. And so I want you to think about your own positionality and how that positionality relates to structures in our society. So those are things like political, economic, and cultural systems that frame the way that we live our everyday lives. So to do this, you're going to have discussion board posts You're going to have short papers every week. They're only 2 pages, so don't worry too much about them. Journal entries, which are graded, but graded in a way that is basically if you put an effort in to really think about the materials and how they relate to your life, then you'll get full credit on those every week. And then you're also going to have quizzes every week that are just 2 questions. And it's to make sure that you're doing the reading and that you understand the reading so that if you don't, I can contact you and get you in the right place before you keep going, since this course goes so quickly in only 6 weeks. And all of the stuff that you need to do is organized by week with what we're covering that week. And then it's broken down into readings, songs, videos, and then assignments. And so there's going to be links on the assignment part of each week to the discussion board, the reflection journal, and the quiz and the assignment for that week. So it should be pretty easy to access. If you have difficulties with anything, of course, contact me or the Blackboard folks using the links in your syllabus. Grading is covered on the syllabus, so it's on pages 2 to 3. It's out of 300 points, but you have ample opportunity for extra credit. So I do not accept any late work at all, none, unless you have a documented emergency. Those are things that doctors have said that you can't even work at home while you're sick, since you're not coming into class. You're doing it all from home. It means that you have a pretty debilitating illness. Or if there's a death in your family that unfortunately needs to be documented. We've just had experiences in the past in our department with students not telling the truth. And so, unfortunately, even though I'm sure all of you are telling the truth when this sort of thing happens, we do need documentation. I also want to make sure that you look at the note that I wrote on the last page of the syllabus. It's just from me to you about some of the things that we're going to be talking about, and how they're sensitive or emotional issues for many people. And I want you to feel free to talk to me about them in the journal entries, or feel free to email me or Google chat me during my virtual office hours on Sundays. So, one of the things that I ask you to do in your introduction post is kind of talk a little bit about your positionality, meaning what is your situated space in the world that we live in. So that could be things like where you're from, where you grew up, your ethnicity, your nationality, your race, your gender identity, your sexuality, and all sorts of, and your religion. So these are all things that are important as we look to the world around us and how we interpret our political and economic systems, because where we come from shapes the way that we see the world around us and how we interpret things. So just more about me that's a little bit more detailed about where I came from and how I ended up in this sort of field is I grew up in Southern California. My dad is from the United States. He was an Air Force kid and grew up all around the world, but mostly in California, in Merced. But my mom's side of the family was way more influential on my upbringing and my culture. And she is from Zimbabwe originally, so that's in southern Africa, right to the north of South Africa. And she has a British father and a Zimbabwean mother, and her side of the family goes back to the southern part of the African continent, all the way back to the 1600s. And growing up, a lot of people were surprised that my mom was from there because I'm white. And as I got older, I got really interested in what that meant, that my family being white is from Southern Africa since the 1600s, and what our history looked like, and what relations between people that looked like me and people who were black in Southern Africa, how that worked out in my family. And I got really interested in race and whiteness and what white supremacy looks like and how it happens in everyday life. So I wrote my master's thesis on my mom and my family. And I wrote it on their experiences of whiteness and how that played out in their everyday lives and how they were participants in the white supremacist regime in what was then called Rhodesia and then in Zimbabwe for a few years before they moved to the United States. I still have family in South Africa. I have family in England. I have family in Australia and New Zealand. So we're all over the place. And most of my research focuses on race because that has been a really defining part of my life, thinking about my own complicity in racist systems, both through my family's lives in Africa and also through my life here in Arizona and in California growing up. So that's what most of my work focuses on. I've also recently been studying more about gender. I identify as a woman, and I was also born a female, which we'll talk about in our Gender Justice Week in week 4. And I have recently been writing about that in relation to the faith that I grew up in. And so these are all things that I'm interested in, and it affects how I look at the world around me because my experiences, of course, impact my worldview. And so I hope that with me being open and honest with you about where I'm coming from, you feel ready to be honest with me and with your classmates to the point where you feel comfortable. I also welcome any of you to look at my research if you're interested or contact me for examples of it or to talk about it if it's something that you're interested in researching. So you'll have another couple of videos this week on how to read critically, and I hope you enjoy the class.